Boris made a fool of by Robert Peston as COP26 goal fallen between cracks, UK MP taken aback. ITV News political editor Robert Peston outlines the key issues set to be resolved, that will define the success or failure of COP26. The big uncertainty as we approach this final phase of climate negotiations in Glasgow is whether the so-called LMDCs, the like-minded developing countries, collectively meant what their Bolivian spokesman has said, namely that the mitigation section should be excised from COP26's draft cover declaration. At this juncture, you have probably lost the will to live, in despair at having read something of no apparent relevance to you. But please bear with me, as I translate. First of all, the LMDCs are critical to the success of these talks to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, because along with Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka and Saudi Arabia they also include China and India, or 2 out of the top 3 emitters of greenhouse gases. Second, the mitigation section of the declaration is arguably the most important section, because it is the part that is all about forcing countries to re-engineer power generation, transport and how we live such that greenhouse gas emissions are roughly halved by 2030 and eliminated totally on a net basis by the middle of the century. The ITV political editor held no punches as he launched at Boris Johnson as it was revealed that COP26 countries have promised only half the required cuts to greenhouse gases in order to keep global warming to 1.5 C by 2030. Mr. Peston hammered, as of now you have failed to keep 1.5 alive. What can you do in the remaining days to rescue it? The Prime Minister hit back, saying, I agree with you, I think it is in the balance. If I had to define where we have been in the last few days, we had a surge of activity in the first few days, things moved. He stressed that while there was a feeling of life under the keel, global leaders at the climate summit are now finding things are tough. Despite the change in tone of the talks, he was adamant that does not mean it is impossible to keep global warming to 1.5 C by 2030 as he desperately tried to keep the hope alive of the main goal of the conference. Mr. Johnson added, I think with sufficient energy and commitment and with leaders from around the world now ringing up their negotiators to move in the ways they know they can move and should move. Despite suggesting I still think we can achieve it, he warned, I am not going to pretend to you by any means it is a done deal. His comments come as Saudi Arabia have been accused of a considered effort to oppose the 1.5 C goal of the summit because of its role as a major fossil fuel producing nation. Their accusers say Saudi delegates are doing this by exploiting procedural rules that allow them to talk for extended periods of time and raise objections. The opposition by the Saudis has thrown a major obstacle in the progress of the summit. The kingdom's energy minister, Abdulaziz bin Salman, branded the allegations as fabricated when questioned on Sky News. Mr. Johnson also used his speech to claim that COP26 is not going to solve the issue of climate change on its own. But he stressed that if things go well, there is the possibility we can still come away with a roadmap for a solution to anthropogenic climate change. The Prime Minister has continually failed to grasp that success at COP26 requires real climate action and real leadership from the host. To show solidarity with those most affected by the climate crisis, he'd have publicly signed a check helping to meet the needs from developing nations for significant sums of new money to allow them to prepare for and repair the damage from flooding, fires and food shortages. Simply redirecting funds raided from the already depleted aid budget will have dire consequences for millions of people from impoverished communities. This Boris Johnson speech fails to meet the moment again today.